our next session, the DG Ask Me Anything. I know there's a lot of people looking forward to this one here this morning. And for this next session, I'd like to invite Sophie Formica to the stage. Now, Sophie is one of Queensland's most respected broadcasters. She is the founder of Travel Well Media and the incoming co-host of Breakfast on 4BC from 2026. Sophie brings with her more than 3 decades of media experience and a deep passion for tourism, sustainability and community resilience. She is a friend to many people in the room with us today. Please make welcome Sophie Formica.
Thank you so much, Tim, for the very kind words, and you're absolutely right. I think some of the friendships in this room, I'm now proud to say, span over about 15 or so years. And this is a really fantastic session, and it's one that I'd really love everybody to get involved with today. And as he said, I am absolutely passionate about this industry. And I think that media plays a really vital role, particularly in Queensland with what we have ahead of us into 32 and beyond to 45. Because we are the ones that share the story of tourism, and we're also the ones that help to shape what that dream and vision can look like. And while we do it with eyes wide open, and we have to make sure that we hold people to account and we see transparency, I think it's really important that we do it without catastrophizing what the challenges are and where the obstacles might be. And with that, it is my great pleasure today to welcome up onto the stage to say a few words before we hear from all of our Director Generals. Our first DG Ask Me Anything session, where we'll be joined by Andrew Hopper, by Damien Walker and by Graham Frayne. For you to put your hands together first, though, and welcome up onto the stage to join us and to say a few words, the Director General for the Department of Environment, Tourism, Science and Innovation, Patricia O'Callaghan.
If we took a holiday, took some time to celebrate.
Thanks for that, Soph. And I've only got a couple of minutes and just want to say it's an absolute pleasure to be back here at DestinationQ. I'm certainly loving the broad new portfolio, but it certainly feels like home walking into this room. So you've heard from the ministers, and now it's my turn to introduce some of our Director General colleagues. And in the government ecosystem, the DGs are basically the chief executives of the departments that are responsible for implementing government decisions. Our ministers set the strategic direction, the expectations and the policy, and then it's up to us to work with our teams to deliver. And having sat in the room with many of you as one of the industry, I know this is a really important role, and I know there has been frustration in the room that even when ministers are going quickly, sometimes the government departments are not moving quick enough, and the execution can sometimes get lost in the machine. But what I also want to say is that whilst the reality is that that will happen at times. The energy and the momentum across the public service is key, and there is so much of it at the moment. And what I can say to you, having been on the inside for the last 12 months, is that there are thousands of public servants across the state that are trying to deliver for the tourism industry, and the government is mobilising them to make sure that it happens. The fact that we have a key strategy and a light on the hill with Destination 2045 sets the vision and the expectation on what is to be achieved. The Tourism Cabinet Committee is key to oversee the delivery, so there is accountability on what has been promised. And what I can say to you from our DG colleagues is we are embedding that vision across the over 250,000 public servants across the state. Now, what are some of the examples of this on the release of that strategy? So the Minister spoke about being the events capital of Australia and how important that is to achieving D45. And when we listened to the industry, you said to us, we want a more coordinated process around events, and we want buy-in from all of government because there are so many touch points for events across the sector. So the Premier and the Minister announced the $100 million lift to respond to that feedback, and now there is a mechanism across government where all the DGs that have a touch point with events sit together in a committee that I chair. The Premier and the Minister set the expectation and the vision, and it is up to us to deliver on that. And it was so great on the implementation of that committee to see the last ship announced for QPAC at the new Glasshouse Theatre. And I can tell you from an entertainment, a business events and an arts and a culture point of view, the runway to the 2032 Olympics and beyond is certainly looking pretty cool, and that pipeline of events is looking exciting. When it comes to infrastructure investment, we know for you time is money, and we know that coordination is key. So we are working together when it comes to bolstering investment, and it isn't easy when you have so many pieces of legislation, but I can tell you the ability to pick up the phone to another DG and work with their teams makes a difference. And it's going to be great to have Graham here when we talk about our Great Barrier Reef Islands in particular, and I know Sally, who couldn't be here from TMR, the DG, there is so much investment happening on transport infrastructure and the Bruce Highway, which I know will come up. I think even in my own department, we are seeing the benefit of portfolios being together, especially environment and tourism. The Wongetti Trail is case in point. This is a project that has been going for the best part of nearly 10 years. Now, when we took that project on in the new government, the fact that we have shifted that project from a tourism portfolio, which is predominantly policy and investment, and moved it over to Queensland Parks and Wildlife that have the expertise and the skills in developing infrastructure and protected areas, I can tell you that there has been a momentum shift. And I can also tell you from a legislation point of view, the Tourism Department no longer has to apply for approvals because we are now the custodian of the approvals. So Section 34 is no longer there for us as a combined department, and that means quicker on the ground work. So it was exciting to see the progress with the Minister up there just recently, and this is going to be a game changer for the state. We know ecotourism is going to be key. The Minister spoke about the narrow track, the Thornsbourne Trail from an area that I'm from up north, to see that now on the ground, being executed, working with the private sector in world expeditions, but importantly with our First Nations people. Again, more tangible examples that we are getting on with the job. But we know we have a lot more to do. We know we have to roll our sleeves up, and I'm excited to be with our DGs on the panel today to answer any question from the room. And I just want to remind everybody, when this DG panel happened about 10 years ago, I was in the room and I was nice about my questions, so I'm reminding everybody of that now. Thank you, Sophie.
Well said, Trish. It is World Kindness Day on the back of that. Please welcome up onto the stage Andrew Hopper, Director General of the Department of Sport, Racing, Olympic and Paralympic Games, Damien Walker, Director General of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, and Graham Frame, Director General of the Department of Natural Resources and Mines, Manufacturing and Regional and Rural Development for this Q&A. And you know that as we did in the past, you can jump onto the QR code if that's the easiest way for you to get questions to us. Good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for being with us. If I'd like to first ask each of you to say a few words about the portfolio, where you see it fits in terms of 2032. Damien, do you want to go first?
I hope this is where, there we go. So, Director General, Department of the Premier and Cabinet, and no, that's right. It does sound like I'm answering an estimates question. I apologise. So the central agency for government. So that's essentially our role. We do a whole bunch of coordination, and leading into 2032, we've got a bit of a coordination role.
Thank you, Andrew.
The key thing for us, I suppose, is we have legacy for the Games, and that extends out to 2042. We can happily extend that to 2045. We play a significant role across all the Games delivery partners there, and also all things sport. And I think linking in with Trish and TQ and our colleagues, we're seeing some great movement, which is fantastic.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you. Given the breadth of our portfolio, we touch the Games in a number of ways, including obviously tenure for things like venues, but we also have that broader role around regional and rural development to work with our colleagues to ensure that all of Queensland is benefiting from both the Paralympic and Olympic Games. And of course, with the work that the Minister talked around, things like the Great Barrier Reef Islands or other pieces where we contribute in that space, the opportunity for us around the broader offering that Queensland has for those visitors.
I really do want this to be as much of the interaction from the audience as possible. But Damien, I'd just like to start with you off the back of the remarks from Trish. Is this the secret sauce to get all of these things to happen in a timely fashion, in a way that allows operators to have confidence in the vision that we are presenting, that these departments will work together to create the most frictionless way that tourism touches so many different portfolios?
Secret sauce. I think there's probably a few bits to the secret sauce. There's, good government policy, appropriate levels of investment in tourism, and supporting infrastructure and other activities. But at the end of the day, it's a really complex system. So people, you all run organisations that in and of themselves are complex. This is 300,000 public servants, multiple billions of dollars of spend spread across Queensland, delivering everything from healthcare services to maintaining your roads. The silos that emerge that we speak of happen naturally because, in fact, these are the requirements that we have of these departments. We want them to get on and deliver the best healthcare we can possibly deliver. We want them to build roads, etc. So the silos do emerge. Our role, and so you're right, a key part of the secret sauce is how the key departments, not all of them, but the key departments that will help deliver on that tourism and events opportunity in the lead up to and beyond 2032 are indeed how do the DGs, how do their key officials work together with you as industry to make sure that we get the outcomes we want.
And just off the back of that, Graham, if you could pick up again on the islands, that's now popped up a few times already in the short time we've been in this room together. I think people can see the opportunity that lies there and how we can do it efficiently though and quickly.
Thank you. So I think it's about a couple of things. One about is thinking differently about how in our portfolio we understand the concept of what we do with the lands. And as many people in this audience will know, this agency has supervision or management of about 60% of the state's land. And in some way we touch 100% of the state's land if you think of your property valuations that you all get. What the challenge that we have been set by government in the case of, whether it be the Great Barrier Reef Islands or indeed a number of the other places where we play in the tenure space for some of the work that the people in this room do, is how do we understand innovation in that space for best and highest land use? How do we understand that outreach to the private sector to have those engagements? And how do we understand the timeframes that industry needs to work to in order to get business done? And we know that industry looks for timely and certainty. And so that's the challenge and opportunity for us. In the case of somewhere like Double Island, we made the change to basically bring Double Island in as freehold, which means it really frees up the nature of the contracting arrangements, the tenure, the time frames, and also the time for which we can negotiate with the private sector around what they seek to do with somewhere like Double Island, because we also know that businesses need lengthy contracts in these sorts of arrangements in order to be able to get funding and financing certainty. So for us it is, in many ways it's not the rocket science piece. It is about being open to conversation. It's being about understanding the pressures that those that we're dealing with work under it, and it's about looking to basically have the conversation to drive to the what is possible.
Trish, you mentioned in your opening remarks arts and culture, and I know that many people in the room would have just been so buoyed for the reminder of what's about to happen at South Bank with Glass House. We know that they've just announced that there's going to be more outdoor opportunities. We speak so much about that injection that can happen with sport, and it can't be underestimated from what we heard from Robbie today. I dare say though, when those days extend beyond the event into the other opportunities that arts and culture will present for us in Queensland, and the fact that a beautiful bottle of red is a lot more than a couple of Guinnesses, that there is an opportunity to look at the calendar and make sure it's well plugged in to see the arts grow at the same time we see the opportunity through major events.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you so far around that, and we've seen the power of arts and culture, and I think the reality and the stats show that our visitors that are coming into the state for an arts culture experience are also coming with a higher disposable income. So I think we've seen just recently TQ obviously lock in Pretty Woman. I encourage anyone that, well, you've missed out now, but I think that for anyone that was able to go, a phenomenal show that had an exclusive premiere for Queensland. We obviously seen the last year with Sting. We've got Sharon Schwimming, who is the DG of Education, but also has the arts portfolio. She sits on our major events and strategic events committee. So we're certainly coordinating our approach around our arts and culture activities, but I think there's a lot more in the pipeline, and I think you'll see that definitely in the next 3 years.
And then I think maintaining the attraction. The announcement today was the dates for Magic Round next year, and you know we had the minister tell us about the $100 million pot. Is that going to be enough to keep us competitive at a time when we know the other states are also putting their hands in deep pockets? Andrew?
Oh, gosh. Look, I think the reality is it's a highly competitive and contested space, and I think what Queensland and the audience should take real solace in is where Queensland continues to win is because we keep turning up as a collective. And so, you know, up here you've got a gentleman who's previously led tourism. I had the opportunity to lead tourism. Damien was heavily involved in the delivery of the Commonwealth Games. So there's a real understanding of what's required in the sports space. And so the question of how much money is really how long is a piece of string. The better way to look at it is that when we're together, we win, and that happened with Magic Round. It's happened previously with British and Irish Lions. It happened with Rugby World Cup. There's lots of great examples where we've been better together, and that beats the dollar conversation. And I think the other thing I would say is that the sport bit's important, but it's also the business events that can be put around it. And I think we recently were down in Canberra talking to Sports Integrity Australia. There are huge opportunities to bring international events to Queensland in the lead up to 32 and hopefully beyond, which will be related to sport, but not sport in and of themselves.
I think, Soph, as well, just on the $100 million pot, I think the expectation being set by the Premier and the Minister for us in our negotiations is that it has to be more than just money. So I think Queensland offers a strategic partnership on many levels, whether that's the infrastructure part, whether it's the Team Queensland approach where we've got a one-stop shop when it comes to partners, as well as the other support that the government provides. So I think that is a real key philosophy around the negotiation, not just about the money.
And I'd add to that, and going back to some of the earlier conversation, yes, sometimes it's about, you know, the size of a bucket of money. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about what Damien was talking about earlier in terms of, you know, the areas that the people in this room deal with, and the areas that we deal with as public administrators, you know, are not silos. They are multi-dimensional spider webs. And, you know, what happens here can be caused by what's here. Sometimes you touch something in this part of the spider web, you know, triggers something over here. The ability for government to work in that spider web and that networked way, to speed things up, to look at things differently, to understand that something that's happening in Trish's portfolio is actually very relevant to my portfolio, helps our industries as much as, you know, particular amounts of money, and it's how we tap into that.
Let's get to some of the questions from the audience today. John is asking, many operators in national parks are hamstrung by limited permits and no long-term planning. This prevents businesses from investing in themselves and provides no certainty. What's being done to rectify this? Who'd like to pick that one up?
I think this will be me. So I think certainly this has been a big piece of feedback that was coming through when we were putting the D45 plan together. And I think the Minister is also speaking about some of the legislation that we're putting forward to also look at how we can coordinate the permit systems. So what I would say to this is there has been a lot of inroads in this space. We have got a strategy. We now have an ecotourism policy. We are working through our visitor management framework. So every region in Queensland has a visitor management framework, and we are balancing obviously the requests from our operators, but also ensuring that the environment is also protected through this process. So I think there's certainly been frustration. We're trying to alleviate that. I think the coming months you'll see that alleviate even further, and hopefully we can see more of our operators in our national parks, because seeing what we've done on the Great Barrier Reef and the key role that tourism has played in the conservation of the Great Barrier Reef itself, we know that we can replicate that in terrestrial as well.
This one's for you, Damien, as Head of Public Service. How are you responding to the state's SMEs, small to medium enterprises, with their rising expenses and unaffordability when it comes to things like insurance premiums?
That's an excellent question, and a very difficult one to address, notwithstanding there's quite a bit going on in this space. So insurance premiums are a problem for everyone, including the state government, it's fair to say. So we continue to remind and suggest the players in the insurance industry that they indeed are mindful of these costs. Having said that, though, we're also a taker in the marketplace, and so there needs to be some further work around how we might better get those prices down. The role of government also with regard to some of the other expenses of SMEs, energy, there's an energy plan that was released recently by the Treasurer, which goes a long way to talk about how do we ensure sufficient energy, but more importantly, bring that price down over time. I would have thought the vast majority of our work needs to be the sort of things we're talking about today. Rising tide floats all boats, and that is about growing our economy. So quite a bit of work done by the Queensland Government over recent months around how we just do that. So notwithstanding this doesn't immediately resolve some of the issues that SMEs will be facing, I think generally the more people that visit Queensland, the more businesses that relocate to Queensland, the more growth generally in the economy hopefully goes a long way to addressing some of those issues.
As we continue to take questions from the app, you'll also see that there are 2 microphones that are set up in the room. If you'd like to actually go to one of those microphones to ask your question in person to our DGs, you're more than welcome to. We have a couple of staff members who are there. Just raise your hands and they'll be able to come and get you and take you over to one of those mics. Don't be shy. It's the chance that you have now, if there's something that's popped up in this conversation that you would like to have expanded upon, this is your chance to do it at one of those microphones. In the meantime, Steph from Fraser Island Board Charters that should be boat, I think. The goal is to have 45 world-class ecotourism projects by 2045, yet in some regions there are existing operators who are willing and able to invest in new and sustainable ecotourism products, but they're being held back or they're being halted by the lack of access to islands like Gari. So what's the plan to help to assist the current operators, those that are already working within the ecosystem, so that they can contribute to those 2045 targets and open up access for commercial operators? And I think this goes back to a lot of the conversation that we had when we launched 2045, because while there might be, Trish, a lot that is going on within the departments and on the government side of things, it may not be felt as immediately as the industry would like to see it enactioned.
Yep, so I can take this one, and I know the Gari operators and Fraser Island Boat Charter as well, and I think this is an area, ecotourism and the 45 is not just about new, it certainly is about supporting existing, and I've got to say, we know how special Gari is, but we've already made a lot of leeway in this space. Just recently through the parks team, we have allowed on certain beaches in Gari, predominantly it was limited experiences like walking and snorkeling, but we're now opening that up so you can do a range of other experiences and the operators can take their visitors onto the shores, and previously that wasn't allowed. So we've started to make some leeway. We know operators want to have more access to Gari. We're certainly working through that. I will say around any policy, you change a policy, there are other stakeholders on the other side that also has an impact on. So as we balance this out, we hear the message, but we take some time, but we're also proud that we've made some leeway.
Did you want to add anything to that, Graham, just in terms of the way that those things might be able to be alleviated in future?
Thank you. And certainly, the broader piece that many people in this room will know is part of unlocking the islands in general will be around, a number of issues to do with what we would normally call trunk infrastructure, access, water, power. This is what, as we go through island by island, we are looking at, how those issues work and how they interact with both the leasing arrangements and the broader permitting arrangements that we're looking at. So again, the piece of work we're doing with Trish's part of the world is about how we look at the obstacles, don't simply admire the problem and find ourselves back here in 12, 18 months talking about it again, but how we actually have the hard conversation and look to do something anyway.
Yeah, which unfortunately can sometimes be the perception. It may not be the reality, but the perception is the cogs are slow to turn. And if you're an operator who's desperately wanting to upskill your staff so that you can add something else so that you start to diversify what it is that you offer. Those weeks that turn into months turn into opportunities that you feel like you're missing. Gemma from Western Cape York Eco Tours says, I reviewed the Tourism Week program, appreciate the inclusion of a dedicated day for Indigenous tourism, but what are your thoughts on a dedicated day and regional voices focusing on the distinct challenges and brand building needs and opportunities for our regional and remote tourism operators and industry?
Yep, I'm happy to take that. So thanks, Gemma, for your question. And having just been back from Cape York with the Minister, I've got to say the product up there is incredible for those that haven't been up there. Not just our national parks and our natural assets, but also the fact that we were walking with our First Nations partners and seeing art and cultures in the rocks and the cliffs that look like they were done yesterday but are 40,000 years old, but access is key. So I think with our partners in QTIC, I know Elsa and Tash would be more than open to have dedicated sessions focusing on this. I look at these places like up at the Cape or further north or even out west, the product out there is incredible. It is authentic. People want it. You saw the numbers from the British and Irish Lions. To see an 80% increase to the outback as a result of that event is incredible. So I think there is a real opportunity for Queensland around this. We've got the product, it's just how do we access it and sell it.
And just on partnerships with industry, Andrew, and I think that there are plenty of tourism operators and council who would also be looking at how you start to activate sort of pre-game events and be attracting visitors and starting those kinds of conversations now to take best advantage.
Yeah, and we're certainly right at the beginning of that journey. So the Games governance for the host territory, so not how the OCOG will work with the IOC, but how we will coordinate ourselves is set and in place now, which is fantastic. And part of that, there are a number of committees. Government loves a committee, but trust me, they're being productive. One of them is City Readiness and Operations, and that committee is going to be very focused on that's just for the 13 councils that are involved in delivery of the Games directly. That will absolutely lead a discussion around what does pre-Games training look like, what are those opportunities from now right through to 2032. And then we will broaden that out to contemplate the whole of the state so that we can basically go forward with a model that allows for any country that's visiting now, and there are countries visiting now looking for opportunities. So when they come, we need to know they're coming, and we need to help direct them in the right direction as to where the assets are and where the opportunities are. And rest assured, there are countries going into Mackay. Just as there are countries coming into Brisbane, and that will only increase once we see the sport program locked in somewhere in 2026, and that's when we'll get real certainty about what's coming. But the governance frameworks that we've been setting up now are the foundational pieces to make sure we're ready to go.
Graham, you wanted to add something to that before we head to the floor?
Yeah, just briefly, and back on Gemma's question, one of the pieces of work, again, talking in the collaboration space, that my agency does with Trisha's agency in particular, is looking at how do we not simply unlock opportunities in regional and rural Queensland in somewhere like tourism, but how do we bring what is existing there to the fore? And the reason why government has a regional and rural development focus sitting within a particular department is effectively to be the voice at the table that says, whatever measure you take of state value or wealth, whether it be gross state product or any other, if that benefit is simply accruing to one part of the state, being the southeast, then fundamentally government has not achieved what it has set out to do. And so, the sorts of things Gemma is raising in that question about how are we bringing regional and rural Queensland to the fore, how are we not only providing the opportunity but unlocking what is already there, is a key point of conversation between a number of the agencies up here.
Thank you, Graham. Let's head to the floor. Mark Olsen, good morning.
Good morning. Just to prove that the microphones do work, 2 quick questions. Andrew, following on from the point about the teams, communities right across Queensland want to find their moment during the torch relay, and we all remember the torch going underwater on the Great Barrier Reef. How do they bring great ideas to your department about showcasing during the torch relay. And Trish, I couldn't let you go without asking about helping our operators transition from commercial activity permits to the 15-year commercial activity agreements that are available. How are you going to help us to help our operators transition from those 3 to 5s into those 15s, and what sort of time frame are you thinking about? Thank you.
Okay, I'll go first. So it is a real priority for us, Mark, and you would have noticed in the D45 plan we made a commitment as one of the actions to set up a tourism concierge. So there will be a dedicated team helping operators transition and providing them that one-on-one support. So absolute priority. It's certainly there. We've realigned the team to make sure we can accommodate that support, and the timing for that is imminent.
Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And obviously, you'll make a submission for yourself to be the carrier of the torch, I would have thought. But look, the reality is the organising committee are responsible for building that program out. And of course, there'll be a range of parties that they've got to engage with. And certainly, we're not at that point yet. But I'm very sure that when that torch relay route is selected, I would hope that we can ensure that it travels vastly through Queensland and not far across the rest of the country selfishly. But it's very, very early days for that piece of work. And I think one of the bits that we're trying to be mindful of is we've got a real education process to go through internally, but also externally, about when are these moments starting to be thought about, when can you have input into them. You've seen them, and the Minister talked earlier about the procurement portal opening. Great first start, really, really important, but it's just one step of many, many thousands to go. And to give you some scale, we heard about 9,500 whistles. 6 million pieces of something need to be procured by the OCOG, just the OCOG. So that's not government, it's not GECA who are doing the building, just the OCOG. So it's big procurement.
This whole procurement, I think we've really begun that conversation now, the first of those more detailed understandings of what might be required and how businesses in Queensland and across the country can engage in that process. That has begun. But there'll still be people saying, well, how and when? So who do they reach out to? Where is the first point of contact if somebody is listening or knows somebody who wants to know whether or not they have something that might actually be able to be scaled to be a part of that process?
Look, I think the challenge at the moment is there are groups that are all doing some level of procurement, so it is a bit tricky, there's no doubt. I think we spend a lot of our time redirecting traffic and being a basic concierge for all things games, as do others, not just us, but we spend a lot of time doing that. So I think reach out where you feel comfortable and you have a place to make contact, and then what you should be seeking is clarity about where you go next. And I know a lot of the people in this room, by all means, reach out, and if we can help, we will absolutely help you, and we do that now in a range of ways.
You know, Damien, as Andrew mentioned earlier, you were the DG in the past of tourism, you know how this industry works, but then you've also now seen under Minister Andrew Powell how this tourism committee has come together. What have you seen in your understanding of the work that they've been able to do just in 12 months in fast-tracking these portfolio connections?
I think Minister Last touched on it. When you bring together a committee with a focus on growing tourism, and you have senior ministers that meet regularly, focused on the issues that they're hearing from industry, you get decisions quickly. The other thing that's helpful for, and I touched on this a little earlier around the complexity of the system, there's many of us, right? The notion, and I've noticed my boss has walked in the room, the Premier of Queensland, what interests my boss fascinates me. And so when you have a group of senior ministers that gather to talk about tourism and how does one fast track that, with all of their DGs and the central agencies in DPC and Treasury, it starts to permeate throughout the sector. And so Andrew makes a good point. It's a big, complex system, but find your pathway. There is no wrong door. If you have a familiar relationship with someone already in a department, just contact them. It's very pleasing that my observation over the last 12 months has been if you call Andrew and it's not the right spot, Andrew will find some way for you to go or find you the right person. Likewise, the others around here, and I think that speaks to the government of Queensland are focused on growing tourism, and they made it clear to the public service that we're focused on growing tourism.
I love it. They're Director Generals / concierge.
Basically like a help desk.
That
Graham,
does hark back to Minister Powell's inadvertent challenge to the room earlier around a bunch of DGs to see what the collective noun for Directors General is.
And have you come up with anything? We're still working on it.
There are many opportunities.
And if I could stay with you, Graham, a question from the floor. What plans are there in place for formal integrations with Queensland businesses to be part of this that we're talking about, the procurement process, what that supply chain and that manufacturing opportunity could look like for the Olympics?
Yeah, there's effectively two ways. One is the more up here, what I would call the top-down way. And that effectively starts with the work that we are doing as an agency in conjunction particularly with Andrew's agency and also Public Works around how we are embedding local supply chain, particularly the manufacturing supply chain, into state procurement policy more broadly. And my deputy in this space sits on all the key bodies in government around the procurement policy and how we bring it to life effectively. The bottom-up way is, as some in this room will know, we have a series of manufacturing hubs throughout this state where we have people on the ground throughout the state that are working with manufacturing businesses on a day-to-day basis. And effectively the role of those hubs in driving bottom-up examples of where businesses want to interact with something like the Games, and what we bring from that top-down, feeding it into policy and practice. We basically use those to meet in the middle to provide those opportunities.
Andrew?
Yeah, and I could just add to that with a real-life example. So 2 years it takes to grow a pineapple, I'm told. That's what I'm told by the Queensland farmers. So they want to know now...
Sorry, to grow a pineapple?
To grow a pineapple.
Yes.
Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Is it right?
I think so.
Oh, gosh.
It's the same fact I wheel out, so I hope so.
It has to be right.
Maybe it's 12 months.
But the point is,
3 years?
Oh, well, it just got worse.
How big's that pineapple?
So I'm just quoting what I got told. But no, 3 years. So let's go with 3 years. So the Queensland farmers now are asking how many pineapples are going to be required in 2032? Because, of course, we want Queensland produce available. They're talking about how much cotton is going to be required for uniforms. These are their questions. And they're obviously questions for the OCOG. Then you've got questions from them around shrubs, things used for, plants used for landscaping. That's a question for GECA. So that's one of the examples of where something's come into us quite randomly. It just happened at a function where I met some folks, and so we will be directing those questions and engaging, and we already have with OCOG and subsequently GECA, to see what answer we can provide. But the reality is right now, I don't think anyone could guess how many pineapples we're going to need. But it's knowing that that's a question, knowing what the timeline looks like, and making people aware that you deliver anything through really, really good communication, and that's what we're very aware of.
And I'll finish with you, Trish, as we wrap up in this final minute. I think overwhelmingly what we hear, though, in having some clarity over where the end goal is, whether it's to 32 and then to 45, what we're really hoping, and through these departments working together, is it gives some certainty to the people in the room who are doing this every single day.
It certainly does give certainty, and I hope, especially through our reporting measures back to you, you can see that it is more than just words. The D45 is the light on the hill. It's the strategy and the vision that keeps us going. But already in 12 months, we have actioned so many of the key priorities in there. We know we have a lot more work to do, and we know, we have to work with the industry to deliver. But I think there is such a momentum and a vibe across the government. They're a pretty cool bunch of people as well. Might not look it, but we are pretty cool, and I think we do work together really well. So in 12 months' time, when we're sitting on this panel, hopefully you can see we've delivered more.
You can tell that Graham likes to party. Look at his socks. Could you please put your hands together and thank our Director Generals this morning, particularly for giving us so much of your time. We know how busy at this point each of you are, so for you to come together with this much time for this audience and to be able to give us such candid and insightful conversation is really very much appreciated, and it means that you can see again this direct access to the leaders that are helping to shape that policy and deliver it to you and the broader community. And the whole of government priority we can see still remains tourism, and part of the reason for that is because we know it is such an area area of passion for the Premier of our state as well, and he has joined us in the room. And so with that, as we clear ourselves from the stage, I would like you to continue the applause as we welcome to the stage the Premier of Queensland, the Minister for Veterans, the Honourable David Crisafulli.
If we took a holiday,